Arriving at the hotel after a mission, the army officer froze when he saw a cleaning lady identical to his youthful beloved, wearing the same earrings, the very ones he had given her as a gift before she disappeared 26 years ago. The humid Charleston air wrapped around Colonel Richard Haverhill like an unwelcome embrace as he stepped out of the taxi at the Ashford Colonial Inn. 26 years had passed since he'd last walked these cobblestone streets, yet every shadow seemed to whisper Marissa's name. At 52, the lines around his eyes spoke of more than just his recent deployment in Afghanistan. They told the story of a man who'd been searching for something he'd lost long before he ever picked up a rifle. The bellhop, a young man barely out of his teens, struggled with Richard's single military duffel bag. "Welcome to the Ashford, sir. First time in Charleston." "No," Richard replied, his voice carrying the weight of decades. "I used to know this place well. The inn hadn't changed much. The same antebellum architecture, the same Spanish moss draping the oak trees like funeral shrouds, the same scent of magnolias that had once made him believe in forever, but forever had lasted exactly one day, until Marissa Coldwell vanished on the eve of their wedding, taking with her the emerald earrings he'd given her, and leaving behind nothing but questions that had haunted him through 2 decades of military service. "Your room is ready, Colonel Haverhill," the desk clerk said, sliding an old-fashioned key across the mahogany counter. "Room 237. Will you be staying long?" "I'm not sure yet." Richard pocketed the key, his fingers automatically finding the small velvet box he'd carried for 26 years, the wedding ring that had never found its way to Marissa's finger. Some habits died hard, even when hope should have died harder. The elevator creaked its way to the 2nd floor, each groan of the ancient machinery, a reminder of time's relentless march. Richard had seen combat in 3 different countries, had led men through firefights that would break lesser souls, but nothing had prepared him for the particular kind of warfare that was returning to the scene of your greatest defeat. Room 237 overlooked the garden where he'd proposed to Marissa on a spring evening that felt like a lifetime ago. She'd been 26 then, radiant, brilliant, and completely captivated by the young army lieutenant who promised her adventures around the world. He'd been 26 too, full of dreams and certainties that the universe had taken great pleasure in destroying. Richard set his bag on the 4-poster bed and moved to the window. The garden below was exactly as he remembered. White roses climbing the trellis, the fountain where they'd made wishes that would never come true, the gazebo where she'd said yes to his proposal with tears streaming down her face. "God help me," he whispered to the empty room. "What am I doing here?" But he knew the answer. The nightmares that had followed him through Iraq, through Afghanistan, through every mission where death had been a constant companion, all led back to one haunting question: what had happened to Marissa Coldwell? A soft knock interrupted his brooding. Housekeeping. Richard opened the door to find a young woman with a cleaning cart, her dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She couldn't have been more than 26, the same age Marissa had been when she disappeared. The resemblance was subtle at first. Something about the way she held her head, the gentle curve of her jaw. "I'm sorry, sir. I thought the room was empty. I can come back later." "No, it's fine. I was just..." Richard's words died in his throat as the woman turned more fully toward him. The resemblance to Marissa was striking. The same dark eyes, the same delicate features, but it was what she wore that made his heart stop beating. Dangling from her ears were a pair of emerald earrings, not similar to the ones he'd given Marissa. The exact same ones, the unique teardrop cut, the distinctive platinum setting, the small diamond accent that had made them one of a kind when he'd had them custom-made at Cartier in New York. The world tilted on its axis. Richard gripped the door frame, his knuckles white, as 26 years of carefully constructed walls came crashing down. "Sir, are you all right?" The young woman's voice seemed to come from very far away. "You look like you've seen a ghost. Those earrings," Richard managed, his voice barely above a whisper. "Where did you get those earrings?" She touched them self-consciously, a gesture so achingly familiar it nearly brought him to his knees. "These old things. My aunt gave them to me when I was little. Said they belonged to my mother." "Your mother?" The words came out strangled. "I never knew her. Aunt Corinne raised me up in the Ozarks after I was found. Well, after whatever happened when I was little, I don't really remember much before I was 5. She studied his face with growing concern. "Sir, You're pale as a sheet. Should I call someone? Richard forced himself to breathe, to think like the military officer he was instead of the lovesick young man he'd once been. I'm fine. Just jet lag. What's your name? Diana Whitlock. She hesitated, then added, I'm sorry if I'm bothering you. I know I don't look like much, just the help and all, but you seem really upset about something. Diana, he repeated, testing the name. It suited her. Marissa had always loved that name. They'd talked about naming their daughter Diana if they ever had children. You said you were found. What do you mean? Aunt Corinne always said I was left at some chapel down in Savannah when I was tiny. She took me in, raised me as her own. These earrings were the only thing I had with me. Diana's eyes softened with memory. She used to say they proved I came from good people, even if those people couldn't keep me. Richard's mind raced. 26 years ago, Marissa had disappeared wearing those exact earrings. Now this young woman, who looked remarkably like Marissa, claimed they'd belonged to her mother. The timing, the resemblance, the earrings, it couldn't be coincidence. Diana, he said carefully, where exactly in the Ozarks did you grow up? Little place called Cedar Ridge. Most folks never heard of it. Aunt Corinne has a cabin up there. Pretty isolated, she said. It was better that way. Safer. Diana glanced at her watch. I should really get back to work. These rooms won't clean themselves. Of course, I'm sorry for keeping you. Richard stepped aside, but as she moved past him with her cart, he caught a whiff of her perfume. Not the same as Marissa's, but something about it, maybe the way it mixed with her natural scent, made his chest tight with memory. Colonel? Diana paused at the threshold. I know this sounds weird, but have we met before? You seem familiar somehow. Richard's heart hammered against his ribs. No, I don't think so. She nodded, but her eyes lingered on his face with puzzled recognition. Well, if you need anything during your stay, just let housekeeping know. Welcome to Charleston. After she left, Richard sank onto the bed, his hands shaking as he pulled out his phone. Cedar Ridge, Arkansas, the Ozarks. He'd start there. He'd find this Aunt Corinne, and he'd get answers to questions that had been eating him alive for more than 2 decades. Because either this was the cruelest coincidence in the history of the world, or Diana Whitlock was walking, breathing proof that Marissa Coldwell's story didn't end the night she disappeared. Richard looked out the window at the garden below, where shadows were beginning to lengthen with the approaching evening. For the first time in 26 years, he allowed himself to feel something he'd buried so deep he'd forgotten it existed. Hope. But hope, he knew, could be the most dangerous emotion of all. Richard couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Diana's face morphing into Marissa's, those emerald earrings catching the light like fragments of a shattered dream. By dawn, he'd made a decision that would have seemed insane to anyone who didn't understand what it meant to live with unanswered questions for 26 years. He was going to watch Diana Whitlock. The hotel's breakfast service began at 6:30, and Richard positioned himself in the lobby with a newspaper and coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. He felt like a stalker, and maybe he was, but those earrings had opened a door he'd sealed shut decades ago. If there was even a chance that Diana was connected to Marissa, he had to know. You're up early. Diana's voice startled him from behind. She was pushing a cart loaded with cleaning supplies, her hair pulled back in the same simple ponytail, wearing the standard housekeeping uniform that somehow looked elegant on her. Military habit, Richard said, folding his newspaper. Once you're used to dawn patrol, sleeping in feels like a luxury you can't afford. Diana smiled, and the expression was so achingly familiar it nearly took his breath away. Marissa had smiled exactly like that. A little shy, a little knowing, as if she could see right through whatever facade you were trying to maintain. I know what you mean, growing up with Aunt Corinne. We were always up before sunrise. She said the mountains were most honest in the early morning, before the rest of the world woke up and started lying to itself. Sounds like a wise woman. She was, Diana's face clouded. She's sick now, cancer. That's actually why I'm here in Charleston instead of back home. The treatments are expensive, and the hotel work pays better than anything I could find in Cedar Ridge. Richard felt something cold settle in his stomach. I'm sorry to hear that. How long has she been ill? About 6 months, the doctors say. Diana shook her head. I'm sorry. You don't need to hear about my troubles. You're a guest here and I'm keeping you from your breakfast. I don't mind. Sometimes talking helps. Richard leaned forward slightly. What did the doctor say? That she doesn't have much time left? Maybe a few weeks if we're lucky. Diana's voice was steady, but Richard could see the pain in her eyes. She raised me from the time I was 5. She's the only family I've ever known. 5 years old. The same age Diana claimed to have been when her memories began. Richard's pulse quickened. You mentioned yesterday that you don't remember much from before then. That must be difficult. It is. Sometimes Aunt Corinne always said it was trauma. That whatever happened to my birth parents was so bad that my mind just blocked it out, she said. The important thing was that I was safe now, that I had a family who loved me. But you've never tried to find out more, about your birth parents, I mean. Diana was quiet for a long moment, her fingers unconsciously touching the emerald earrings. I used to ask questions when I was younger, but Aunt Corinne would get this look, like she was scared of something. She'd say that some doors were better left closed, that knowing the truth wouldn't bring back what was lost. The words hit Richard like a physical blow. He'd spent 26 years wondering if Marissa was dead or alive, if she'd left him willingly or been taken against her will. The not knowing had been a special kind of torture. But maybe Diana was right. Maybe some doors were better left closed. But then he looked at her again. Really looked. The resemblance to Marissa wasn't just superficial. It was in the way she tilted her head when she was thinking, the way her left hand gestured slightly when she talked, the way she bit her lower lip when she was nervous. Genetic inheritance was powerful, but this felt like something more. Those earrings, Richard said carefully. You said they were the only thing you had when you were found. Diana nodded. Aunt Corinne said they were pinned to my dress. There was a note. But, she hesitated. But what? She never showed it to me. Said it was too painful, that it would only hurt me to read it. I used to sneak into her room sometimes when I was a teenager, looking for it. But I never found anything. Richard's mind was racing. A note. There had been a note with the earrings. Diana, I know this might sound strange, but would you mind if I asked you a few more questions? Maybe over coffee sometime when you're not working? Her eyes narrowed slightly, and for a moment Richard saw a wariness there that reminded him of Marissa's more cautious moments. Why, I mean, you seem like a nice man, Colonel, but you're asking an awful lot of personal questions for someone I just met yesterday. She was right to be suspicious. Richard scrambled for a plausible explanation that didn't make him sound like a complete lunatic. I lost someone once, someone very important to me. She disappeared, and I never found out what happened to her when I saw you yesterday, wearing those earrings. There was something familiar about them. I thought maybe. You thought maybe I was connected to whoever you lost. I know how it sounds. Diana studied his face for what felt like an eternity. Finally, she sighed. I get off work at 3. There's a coffee shop called Magnolia's on King Street. If you want to buy me a latte and ask your questions, I guess there's no harm in it. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. I might not have any answers you want to hear. After she left, Richard sat alone in the lobby, his mind churning with possibilities and memories. He pulled out his phone and did something he hadn't done in years. He Googled Marissa's name. The results were painfully sparse. A few old newspaper articles about her disappearance. A couple of social media memorial pages that friends had created over the years, hoping she might see them and come home. But nothing new. Nothing that might explain how her earrings had ended up with a child found in Georgia and raised in Arkansas. But wait. Richard scrolled back through Diana's words. She'd said she was found at a chapel in Savannah, not Georgia. In general, Savannah was only about 2 hours from Charleston, if someone had taken Marissa from Charleston and wanted to get rid of a child. Richard's phone buzzed with an incoming text from his old Army buddy Jake Morrison, who'd made a career in private investigation after leaving the service. Heard you were back stateside. How was Afghanistan? Buy you a beer sometime. Richard stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, I need a favor. Can you run a background check on someone? Quietly. The response came almost immediately. When have I ever been loud about anything? Send me the details. Richard hesitated, his fingers hovering over the phone's keyboard. He was about to cross a line he couldn't uncross. Invade the privacy of a young woman who'd done nothing but be kind to a stranger. But those earrings, those damn earrings were proof of something. And he had to know what. Diana Whitlock, 26. Currently working at Ashford Colonial Inn in Charleston. Raised in Cedar Ridge, Arkansas, by an aunt named Corinne. No last name for the aunt yet. Claims to have no memory before age 5. Was found abandoned at a chapel in Savannah. I need to know if there's any connection to someone named Marissa Coldwell who disappeared from Charleston in 1998. Jake's response was immediate. Marissa Coldwell? Jesus, Rick. Isn't that the girl who... Yes, just be discreet, okay? This might be nothing. Roger that. Give me 48 hours. Richard pocketed his phone and walked to the window overlooking the garden. Somewhere in the distance, church bells were chiming the hour, and the sound transported him back to that terrible morning 26 years ago, when he'd stood at the altar of St. Michael's, waiting for a bride who would never come. He'd been so sure then that love conquered all, that their connection was strong enough to overcome any obstacle, young and naive, and completely unprepared for a world where people simply vanished without explanation. Now, looking out at the garden where he'd once believed in forever, Richard found himself hoping that some vanishings might not be permanent after all. But hope, as he'd learned the hard way, was a dangerous thing to carry. Still, as he watched the morning light filter through the Spanish moss, he couldn't shake the feeling that yesterday had changed everything. Diana Whitlock was more than just a young woman who happened to resemble someone he'd once loved. She was a key to a lock he'd been trying to open for 26 years. The drive from Charleston to Cedar Ridge took Richard through landscapes that shifted from coastal lowlands to rolling hills, then finally to the rugged beauty of the Arkansas Ozarks. Each mile felt like a journey backward through time, away from the manicured elegance of the historic district, and into a world where secrets could hide for decades among the pine-covered ridges. He'd called in sick to his consulting job, the first time in his military or civilian career. But Diana's words about Aunt Corinne being ill had given him a sense of urgency he couldn't ignore. If the old woman was dying, she might be taking crucial answers with her to the grave. Cedar Ridge wasn't even a dot on most maps. The GPS lost signal twice as Richard navigated increasingly narrow mountain roads, following directions he'd gotten from a suspicious gas station attendant who'd wanted to know what business a city fellow had with the Whitlock place. Corinne don't get many visitors, the man had said, eyeing Richard's rental car with obvious distrust. She's particular about her privacy. Now, as Richard's sedan struggled up a dirt road that was more suggestion than actual pathway, he began to understand why. The isolation was complete. No power lines, no cell towers, just endless forest, and the sound of his engine laboring against the grade. The cabin appeared suddenly around a bend, as if it had been hiding behind the trees. It was larger than Richard had expected. A 2-story log structure with a wraparound porch and smoke curling from a stone chimney. Despite its rustic appearance, everything looked well maintained. Someone took pride in this place. Richard parked beside an old pickup truck and sat for a moment. Gathering his courage, he was about to knock on a stranger's door and ask questions about events that might destroy everything he thought he knew about the woman he'd loved. But Diana's face, so heartbreakingly similar to Marissa's, gave him the strength to get out of the car. The porch steps creaked under his weight. Before he could knock, the front door opened to reveal a woman in her 70s, thin to the point of frailty, with steel gray hair pulled back in a severe bun. Her eyes, however, were sharp as broken glass, and the exact shade of blue as Diana's. "You're him," she said without preamble. "The soldier boy from Charleston." Richard's hand froze halfway to the door. "I'm sorry, Richard Haverhill, the one who gave my sister those emerald earrings." Corinne Whitlock leaned heavily on a wooden cane, but her voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "I've been expecting you for 26 years. The world tilted. "Your sister, Marissa." The name fell between them like a stone into still water, creating ripples that Richard could feel in his chest. "Come in. We don't have much time, and there's a lot you need to know." The interior of the cabin was warm and lived in, filled with handmade furniture and the smell of wood smoke. Corinne moved slowly but deliberately to a leather armchair near the fireplace, gesturing for Richard to take the couch across from her. "How long have you known?" Richard's voice was barely above a whisper. "Known what? That Diana was Marissa's daughter? That you were her father? That my sister died trying to save that child from a monster?" Corinne's laugh was bitter. I've known since the day Greer brought that baby to my door, scared half to death and babbling about drug dealers and death threats. Greer worked on Anthony Blackthorne's estate. Good woman, terrible situation. She's dead now. Car accident. Though I've always had my doubts about that. Corinne studied Richard's face with unsettling intensity. You really don't know any of this, do you? About what happened to Marissa. She disappeared the night before our wedding. The police said there was no sign of struggle. No evidence of foul play. They thought she'd gotten cold feet and run off. Richard's hands were shaking. I've spent 26 years wondering if she left because she didn't want to marry me. Oh, you poor, foolish man. Corinne's expression softened slightly. Marissa loved you more than her own life, literally, as it turned out. Then, what happened to her? Corinne was quiet for so long that Richard wondered if she'd fallen asleep. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of decades of carefully guarded secrets. Anthony Blackthorne saw her at a charity gala 3 months before your wedding, became obsessed with her. He was used to getting whatever he wanted. Money, power, women. When Marissa refused his advances, he decided to take what she wouldn't give. Richard felt something cold and violent unfurling in his chest. He took her, had her kidnapped from the hotel parking lot, chloroform, van, the whole 9 yards, kept her at his estate outside Savannah, thinking he could make her love him if he just had enough time. Corinne's voice turned bitter. Men like Anthony never understand that you can't force love any more than you can force the sun to rise in the west. But Diana, you said Diana was Marissa's daughter. If she was kidnapped, you made love to Marissa the week before she was taken. She was already pregnant when Anthony got his hands on her, though she didn't know it yet. Corinne leaned forward, her blue eyes intense. When she realized she was carrying your child, she knew she had to protect that baby from that monster. Richard's vision blurred. A daughter. He had a daughter. How long did he keep her? 9 months. Long enough for Diana to be born, for Marissa to convince Greer to help her get the baby away from there. She knew Anthony would use the child as leverage to control her. Maybe even... Corinne's voice trailed off. What happened to Marissa? 2 weeks after Greer took Diana, Marissa tried to escape. Anthony caught her at the property line. Corinne's voice became clinical, emotionless, shot her 3 times, left her body in the swamp for the gators. The words hit Richard like physical blows. All these years he'd imagined scenarios where Marissa was alive somewhere, maybe with amnesia, maybe starting over with a new identity. He'd never allowed himself to fully believe she was dead because death meant the end of hope, and hope was all he'd had. The earrings, he said numbly. Marissa gave them to Greer along with Diana, said they were proof of where the baby came from. Insurance in case something happened to her. Corinne pulled a manila envelope from the table beside her chair. She also wrote letters. Lots of them. Richard stared at the envelope as if it might bite him. Letters. To you. To the daughter she might never see grow up. She knew Anthony was getting more unstable, more violent. She wanted to make sure that if she died, there would be some record of the truth. Why didn't you ever contact me? Why didn't you tell me I had a daughter? Corinne's expression hardened. Because Anthony Blackthorne is still alive, still powerful, still dangerous. The man has connections in law enforcement, politics, business. You think I was going to risk Diana's safety by stirring up the past? She leaned back in her chair, suddenly looking every one of her 70-plus years. Besides, I tried once, about 10 years ago, but your phone number had changed. You were deployed overseas, and by the time I tracked you down, Diana was settled here, happy, safe. And now I'm dying, and Diana's going to be alone in the world. She deserves to know where she came from. And you, Corinne's voice softened, you deserve to know your daughter. Richard looked around the cabin, at the family photos on the mantle, the handmade quilts, the signs of a life built on love and careful protection. She's happy here. She was, but she's not a child anymore. She has questions, dreams that this mountain can't contain forever, and Anthony's still out there. What do you mean? Corinne's face went pale. I mean his wife Elaine found out somehow that I knew the truth about Marissa. Last month my cancer medication was switched. What should have been treatment became poison. She met Richard's eyes. I'm not dying of cancer, Colonel Haverhill. I'm dying of murder. The room seemed to spin around Richard. You're saying someone is trying to kill you. Someone succeeded. The doctors give me maybe 2 weeks. Corinne handed him the manila envelope. That's why you need to take these letters. Read them, and decide what you're going to do about it. Because once I'm gone, Diana's going to be completely exposed. Richard's hands trembled as he took the envelope. Through the window, he could see storm clouds gathering over the mountains, casting long shadows across the valley below. Somewhere in Charleston, his daughter was working her shift at the hotel, wearing her mother's earrings and dreaming of a future she didn't know might be built on lies. There's something else, Corinne said quietly. Anthony has a son, Samuel. He's a lawyer. Seems to be a decent man from what I can tell. Word is he's taken a liking to a certain hotel housekeeper. The implications hit Richard like a thunderbolt. Diana doesn't know. How could she? She doesn't even know who she really is. Corinne struggled to her feet. But love has a way of finding the truth, doesn't it? Question is, what are you going to do when it does? Richard sat in his car outside Corinne's cabin for 20 minutes after she'd closed the door, the manila envelope burning like a coal in his hands. The storm clouds that had been gathering all afternoon finally broke, sending sheets of rain across his windshield and turning the dirt road into a muddy ribbon that would make the trip back to Charleston treacherous. But he couldn't leave. Not yet. Not without reading what Marissa had written during those 9 months of hell. The first letter was dated 3 months after her disappearance, written on expensive letterhead from the Blackthorn estate. Richard's heart clenched as he recognized Marissa's careful handwriting, the way she dotted her I's with tiny circles instead of points. My dearest Richard, if you're reading this, then I'm probably dead, and our daughter is hopefully safe with Corinne. I want you to know first and most importantly that I didn't leave you by choice. I was taken by a man named Anthony Blackthorn, and I've been his prisoner for 3 months now. I know you must hate me. I know you probably think I got cold feet and ran away from our life together, but I need you to understand. You were everything to me. Our wedding day was going to be the beginning of our forever, and this monster stole that from us. I'm writing this because I've just realized I'm pregnant with your child. Our child Richard, the one we made that last night we were together, when you told me you'd love me until the stars fell from the sky. I can feel our baby growing inside me, and it's the only light in this darkness. Anthony doesn't know yet. When he finds out, I'm terrified of what he'll do. He's obsessed with the idea that I'll learn to love him, that if he keeps me long enough, I'll forget about you and accept him. He doesn't understand that love isn't something you can force or manufacture. It either exists or it doesn't. And what I feel for you could never be replicated or replaced. I'm going to try to protect our child. There's a woman here named Greer who works in the house. She's kind, and I think I can trust her if something happens to me. If Anthony discovers the truth and his obsession turns to rage, I'm going to ask her to take our baby somewhere safe. I think about you every day. I wonder if you're eating enough, if you're taking care of yourself, if you've moved on and found someone who can give you the life you deserve. Part of me hopes you have, because the thought of you waiting for someone who might never come home breaks what's left of my heart. But mostly, I hope you know that you were loved, completely, desperately, eternally loved. If our daughter asks about me someday, tell her that she was conceived in love and born from a mother who would have done anything to keep her safe, until we meet again. My darling. Marissa. Richard had to stop reading. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold the letter, and his vision was blurred with tears he'd been holding back for 26 years. The rain hammered against the roof of the car like accusations, and somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled across the mountains like the sound of old graves opening. The second letter was dated 6 months later, and Marissa's handwriting was shakier, more desperate. Richard, I gave birth to our daughter 3 days ago. She's perfect. She has your eyes and my stubborn chin, and when she cries, I swear she sounds like she's already arguing with the world. I've named her Diana, after the goddess of the hunt. She's going to be a fighter, I can tell. Anthony is getting worse. More violent, more unpredictable. Yesterday he hit me for the first time, because I wouldn't stop crying after Diana was born. He said I was being ungrateful, that I should be happy to give him a child. When I told him the baby wasn't his, he nearly killed me. I have to get Diana away from here, tomorrow night. When Anthony goes to Savannah on business, Greer is going to take her to Corinne. I'm giving her the emerald earrings you gave me as proof of who Diana is. along with these letters. Corinne will know what to do. I wanted to go with them, but Anthony watches me too closely. If I disappear the same night as the baby, he'll hunt us all down. This way, Diana has a chance. Greer knows to take her to St. Albans Chapel in Savannah, the same church where Anthony first saw me at that charity gala. There's justice in that somehow. I'm scared, Richard. Not for myself anymore, but for Diana. What kind of world am I sending her into? What kind of life will she have without knowing where she came from? But then I remember your hands on my face that last night. The way you promised me that love was stronger than anything else in the universe. I have to believe that's true. I have to believe that somehow, someday, you'll find each other. Take care of our little huntress. Tell her stories about her mother. Tell her she was wanted, planned for, dreamed about. Tell her that even though I couldn't stay to raise her, every breath I took from the moment I knew she existed was for her. Forever yours. Marissa. Richard sat in the growing darkness, rain streaming down the windows like tears. Diana, his daughter Diana, who cleaned hotel rooms and worried about her dying aunt, and had no idea that her father was a man who'd spent 26 years mourning a ghost. The final letter was shorter, written in handwriting so shaky it was barely legible. It was dated just 2 weeks after the second letter. My love, Greer took Diana safely to Corinne 3 nights ago. My sister will raise her with all the love I can't give her myself. The earrings will be her inheritance. Not just the jewelry, but the proof of a love that created something beautiful, even in the midst of something terrible. Anthony found out about the baby today. He's insane with rage. He keeps screaming that I've ruined everything, that I've destroyed his perfect plan. I think he's going to kill me tonight. I'm not afraid to die. I was dead from the moment he took me from you. But now I know that part of us will continue. Diana will grow up strong and smart and brave. And maybe someday she'll understand that everything I did was to give her a chance at the happiness that was stolen from us. Look for her, Richard, when you're ready. When you can handle the truth about what happened. Look for her. She's going to need her father. I'll be waiting for you, wherever souls go when this life is over. Until then, love our daughter enough for both of us. All my love. Always. Marissa. Thunder crashed overhead, and Richard realized he was sobbing. Great, heaving sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than his chest, from a place where 26 years of grief and guilt and unanswered questions had been festering like an infected wound. His phone buzzing pulled him back to the present. A text from Jake. Found something you need to see. Anthony Blackthorne is definitely still alive, still operating out of Savannah. But here's the kicker. His wife Elaine has been making inquiries about a Corinne Whitlock in Arkansas. Recent inquiries. Richard wiped his eyes and called Jake immediately. Jesus, Rick, where are you? You sound like hell. Arkansas, Jake, I need you to run a DNA test. What kind of DNA test? The kind that proves paternity. I need to know if Diana Whitlock is my daughter. There was a long pause. Rick, what the hell have you gotten yourself into? Richard looked back at Corinne's cabin, where a light still glowed in the front window. The old woman was dying, murdered slowly by people who wanted to bury the truth along with her. Diana was in Charleston, unknowingly in love with the son of the man who'd killed her mother, and he was sitting in a car in the Arkansas mountains, holding letters from a dead woman who'd loved him enough to die protecting their child. The truth, Jake. I've gotten myself into the truth. How fast do you need this DNA test? Yesterday. And Jake, be careful who you trust with this information. We're dealing with people who've already killed to keep their secrets. After he hung up, Richard sat in the darkness for a long time, listening to the rain and thinking about the conversation he was going to have with Diana. How do you tell someone that everything they believe about their life is a lie? That their mother died protecting them? That their father is a stranger who's been mourning them for 26 years? But first, he had to get back to Charleston. Diana was working at a hotel where Anthony Blackthorne conducted business, wearing the earrings that could get her killed if the wrong person recognized them. And somewhere in the city, Samuel Blackthorne was falling in love with a woman whose mother his father had murdered. The storm was getting worse, but Richard started the car anyway. Some truths couldn't wait for better weather. The drive back to Charleston through the storm took Richard 8 hours instead of the usual 5. By the time he reached the Ashford Colonial Inn, dawn was breaking gray and uncertain over the historic district, and his phone was buzzing with messages he'd been too focused on the treacherous mountain roads to answer. The first was from Jake. DNA results expedited. Need your sample and hers ASAP. Also found something disturbing about recent deaths in Cedar Ridge area. Call me. The second was from the hotel front desk. Colonel Haverhill, we had an inquiry about your stay from someone claiming to be family. Didn't give any information per policy, but thought you should know. Richard's blood chilled. He parked and immediately called Jake. Thank God, Jake answered on the first ring. Where the hell have you been? I've been trying to reach you all night. Mountain roads, no signal. What did you find? Corinne Whitlock's medical records were hacked 3 weeks ago. Someone accessed her treatment files and pharmacy records. And get this, there have been 4 accidental deaths in that area over the past year. All people who worked for or had connections to the Blackthorne family back in the day. Richard felt the pieces clicking into place like bullets sliding into a chamber. They're cleaning house. Looks like it. This Anthony Blackthorne doesn't leave loose ends. Jake paused. Rick, I ran a preliminary background on Diana Whitlock. The woman doesn't exist before age 5. No birth certificate, no hospital records. Nothing. It's like she materialized out of thin air. Because she did, they gave her a new identity to protect her. From what? From the truth. Richard closed his eyes, seeing Marissa's desperate handwriting, feeling the weight of 26 years of secrets. I need that DNA test, Jake, today. I can have a courier there in 2 hours with a kit. But Rick, if these people are willing to kill to keep their secrets, then Diana's in more danger than she knows. I'll talk to you later. Richard ended the call and sat in the parking lot, watching early morning joggers pass by on the sidewalks where he and Marissa had once walked hand in hand. The normalcy of it all. The coffee shop opening, the newspaper delivery, the hotel guests heading out for breakfast. Felt surreal after the revelations of the past 24 hours. Inside the hotel lobby, Richard approached the front desk with what he hoped was casual interest. I got a message about someone asking about me. The young clerk nodded nervously. Yes, sir. A woman called around midnight, said she was your daughter and needed to reach you urgently. When we wouldn't give her your room number, she got pretty upset. What did she sound like? Older woman, southern accent. She knew you were military, knew you'd been deployed recently, but something about her voice. The clerk shrugged. My grandmother always said I was good at reading people. This woman didn't sound like family asking after family, if you know what I mean. Richard knew exactly what he meant. If she calls again, don't give her any information, and if she shows up in person, call security immediately. Yes, sir. Is everything all right? I hope so. Richard made it to the elevator before his knees gave out. He slumped against the wall, fighting nausea as the implications hit him. Someone knew he was here. Someone knew he was asking questions. And if they were willing to slowly poison an old woman in the mountains of Arkansas, they wouldn't hesitate to eliminate a retired colonel who'd gotten too close to the truth. But first, they'd go after Diana. He found her in the second-floor hallway, methodically cleaning rooms with the same quiet efficiency he'd noticed the first day. She looked up when she heard his footsteps, and her smile was like sunshine breaking through storm clouds. Colonel Haverhill, you look terrible. Are you feeling all right? Diana, I need to talk to you. Privately. It's important. Something in his tone made her straighten. I'm working. I can't just... Please. The word came out more desperate than he'd intended. It's about your aunt. About your family. Her face went pale. Is Aunt Corinne. She's still alive, but she's in danger. And so are you. Diana set down her cleaning supplies with shaking hands. What are you talking about? Richard looked around the hallway, noting the security cameras, the potential for eavesdroppers. Not here. Can you take a break? We need to go somewhere private. Yes. There's a small garden behind the kitchen, staff area. We won't be bothered there. The garden was barely larger than Richard's hotel room. A pocket of green tucked between the historic building and a brick wall. Diana sat heavily on a stone bench, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. You're scaring me, she said quietly. Richard sat beside her, close enough to see the emerald earrings catching the morning light. Up close, they were even more exactly as he remembered. The precise cut of the stones, the delicate platinum filigree, the tiny flaw in the left earring that had made the jeweler apologize and offer a discount. Diana, what I'm about to tell you is going to change everything you think you know about your life. Just say it. Please. Richard pulled out his phone and showed her a photo he'd taken of Marissa at a military ball, just a month before she'd disappeared. Diana's sharp intake of breath told him she saw what he saw. She looks like me. Her name was Marissa Coldwell. She was 26 when this picture was taken. We were engaged to be married. Diana stared at the photo, her face cycling through confusion, recognition, and something that might have been hope. She disappeared the night before our wedding. I spent 26 years thinking she'd left me, that she'd gotten scared and run away. Richard's voice caught. Yesterday I found out she was murdered. I don't understand what this has to do with... She was your mother, Diana. Marissa Coldwell was your mother, and I'm your father. The words fell between them like stones into deep water. Diana went very still, so still that Richard wondered if she was even breathing. That's impossible, she whispered. Your Aunt Corinne is Marissa's sister. She's been protecting you your entire life from the people who killed your mother. Richard reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded letter. This is one of the letters Marissa wrote while she was being held prisoner. She talks about you, about how much she loved you even before you were born. Diana's hands trembled as she took the letter. Richard watched her read, saw the exact moment when denial crumbled into devastating understanding. Tears began streaming down her face. The man who took her, Diana said, her voice barely audible. Who was he? Anthony Blackthorne, drug dealer, among other things. He became obsessed with your mother and kidnapped her when she wouldn't return his feelings. And he killed her. When he found out she'd arranged for you to be taken to safety, Richard felt his own tears starting. She died protecting you, Diana. Everything she did was to give you a chance at life. Diana was sobbing now, great gulping sobs that shook her entire body. Richard wanted to hold her, to comfort her the way a father should, but they were still strangers to each other. Instead, he sat quietly while 26 years of lies crumbled around them both. The earrings, she finally managed. I gave them to your mother when I proposed. She was wearing them when she was taken. Diana touched them with reverence now, as if they were relics. All these years, I thought they were just pretty jewelry. They're proof of who you are. They're proof of a love that created something beautiful, even in the darkest circumstances. Richard pulled out his phone again. Diana, I need to ask you something, and I need you to trust me. I want to do a DNA test to confirm what we both already know. She nodded mutely. And I need you to be very careful about who you talk to, who you trust. The people who killed your mother, who are slowly poisoning Corinne. They're still out there, and they might know that you exist. Diana's eyes widened. Someone's poisoning Aunt Corinne. Her cancer medication was switched. She's not dying of cancer, Diana. She's being murdered. The color drained from Diana's face completely. We have to help her. We will. But first we have to make sure you're safe. Richard hesitated, then decided she needed to know everything. Diana, there's something else. Anthony. Blackthorne has a son, a lawyer named Samuel Blackthorne. Recognition flickered in her eyes, followed immediately by horror. Samuel, oh God, Samuel. You know him. He comes to the hotel sometimes, for meetings, business dinners. We've talked, and I thought maybe. She buried her face in her hands. I was falling in love with the son of the man who murdered my mother. Richard felt something savage and protective rise in his chest. For 26 years, he'd been a soldier without a war to fight, a father without a child to protect. Now, looking at his daughter's tears, he understood exactly what Marissa had felt when she'd chosen to die rather than let Anthony Blackthorne destroy their child. He doesn't know, Richard said firmly. From everything I've heard, Samuel Blackthorne is a good man who has no idea what his father is. But when he finds out who I am, then we'll deal with that when it happens. Richard reached out tentatively and touched her hand. Diana, I know this is overwhelming. I know your whole world just got turned upside down. But I want you to know that you're not alone anymore. You have a father now, and I'm going to protect you the way I should have been able to protect your mother. Diana looked up at him through her tears, and for a moment Richard saw Marissa so clearly in her face that it took his breath away. What do we do now? She asked. Now we prove who you are. We figure out how to save Corinne, and we make Anthony Blackthorne pay for what he did to your mother. The DNA results arrived 48 hours later in a manila envelope that Jake delivered personally. Richard found him waiting in the hotel bar at 7 a.m, nursing black coffee and looking like he hadn't slept in days. 99.9% probability of paternity, Jake said without preamble, sliding the envelope across the table. Congratulations, you're officially a father. Richard stared at the document that made scientific fact of what his heart had known the moment he'd seen Diana wearing Marissa's earrings. 26 years of wondering, of phantom Father's Days and imagined birthdays, reduced to numbers on a laboratory report. There's more, Jake continued. I've been tracking Anthony Blackthorne's business activities. The man's got his fingers in everything. Drugs, money laundering, human trafficking. But here's what's interesting. He's been using the Ashford Colonial Inn for his meetings for the past 6 months. Here, conference room on the 3rd floor, every other Thursday, high-end clientele, cash transactions, the works. And guess who's been assigned to clean that conference room every week? Richard's blood turned to ice. Diana, your daughter's been in the same room as her mother's killer twice a month for half a year, and neither of them knew it. Jake leaned back in his chair. But that's about to change. I intercepted some communications. Anthony knows someone's been asking questions about the old Marissa Coldwell case. He's putting pieces together. How long do we have? Maybe a week, maybe less if Diana does anything to draw attention to herself. Jake studied Richard's face. You look like hell, by the way. When's the last time you slept? Richard couldn't remember. The past few days had been a blur of planning and worry, of watching Diana go through her shifts while fighting the urge to tell her to run as far and fast as she could. But running wouldn't save Corinne, and it wouldn't bring justice for Marissa. I need a favor. Jake, a big one. Name it. I need surveillance equipment, cameras, recording devices, something that can capture evidence of Anthony's illegal activities. Jake's expression grew wary. Rick, what are you planning? Diana's going to help me gather evidence. She has access to that conference room, to the places where Anthony conducts business. We get him on tape, we expose everything, and we make sure he goes to prison for the rest of his miserable life. That's insanely dangerous if Anthony realizes what's happening. He'll do what? Kill us. He already killed the woman I loved, Jake. He's slowly murdering an innocent old woman who's never hurt anyone. I'm done being careful. Jake was quiet for a long moment. There's something else you need to know. About Samuel Blackthorne. Richard tensed. Diana had been a wreck since learning about Samuel's parentage, torn between her growing feelings for him and the horror of loving the son of her mother's killer. He's clean, Jake said. I mean, completely clean. No involvement in his father's businesses. No knowledge of the illegal activities. The guy's what he appears to be. An honest lawyer who happens to have a psychopath for a father. Diana will be relieved. Maybe, but here's the thing. I've been watching him, and he's been asking questions too. About Diana. About her background. I think he's falling hard for her, and he wants to know more about the woman he's falling for. That could be a problem. Or it could be an opportunity. Think about it, Rick. Samuel knows his father's business practices, knows his schedule, has access to information we could never get otherwise. And if he's as honest as he appears to be, Richard saw where Jake was heading. You want to tell him the truth. I want to give him the choice to do the right thing. But that's your call. He's going to be collateral damage no matter what happens. Richard thought about Diana's face when she'd realized who Samuel was. The way she'd looked like her heart was breaking all over again. Young love was complicated enough without adding family murder to the equation. Let me talk to Diana first. They arranged to meet that afternoon in Diana's small apartment above a bakery in the French Quarter. She'd called in sick to work, claiming a family emergency, which, Richard reflected grimly, wasn't exactly a lie. The apartment was tiny but immaculately kept, with handmade quilts and furniture that had clearly been crafted with love in some Arkansas mountain cabin. Diana sat curled in a wooden rocking chair that Richard suspected had been made by Corinne's hands, wearing jeans and an oversized sweater that made her look impossibly young. I keep thinking this is all a dream, she said quietly, that I'm going to wake up and be nobody special again, just a small-town girl cleaning hotel rooms. You were never nobody special, she smiled sadly. You have to say that. You're my father. The words still felt strange between them. But Richard was beginning to understand that parenthood wasn't about biology or time spent together. It was about the fierce protectiveness that had kept him awake for 3 nights running, planning ways to keep Diana safe. "I brought the equipment," he said, pulling a small bag from beside his chair. "Tiny cameras, voice recorders, everything you'll need to document what Anthony's doing in that conference room." Diana examined the devices with the focused attention she brought to everything. "How do I hide them?" "The cameras are built into fake electrical outlets. You install them during your cleaning shift, position them for the best angles. The voice recorders can be hidden anywhere, behind picture frames, inside fake books, taped under tables. And then we wait for Anthony's next meeting and pray we get something that will put him away forever." Diana was quiet for a long time, turning one of the tiny cameras over in her hands. "Richard," she said finally, "what if he recognizes me? What if he realizes who I am?" It was Richard's greatest fear, the scenario that woke him in cold sweats. "He won't. You were a baby when he last saw you. And Corinne's done a good job of keeping you hidden. But the earrings are distinctive, yes. But Anthony's not going to be looking for them, as far as he knows. Marissa took them to her grave." Diana touched the emeralds unconsciously, a gesture that reminded Richard so strongly of Marissa. It was like being punched in the chest. "There's something else we need to discuss," Richard said carefully. "Samuel Blackthorne." Diana's face crumpled. "I can't see him anymore. I can't look at him without thinking about what his father did to my mother. What if I told you that Samuel might be our ally in this? That he might be willing to help us bring his father to justice? You want to tell him who I am. I want to give him the choice to do the right thing. From everything my investigator has found, Samuel's nothing like his father. He's honest, ethical, completely removed from Anthony's illegal activities." Diana stood and walked to the window, looking out at the busy street below. "What if you're wrong? What if he chooses his family over justice? Then we'll deal with that. But Diana, he cares about you. A lot. And people who love each other should have the truth between them, even when that truth is ugly." "Love?" Diana's laugh was bitter. "How can we talk about love when everything started with murder?" Richard joined her at the window. "Because your mother loved me. And I loved her. And that love created you. Anthony Blackthorne took a lot of things from us, but he couldn't take that." Diana leaned against him, and Richard felt something settle in his chest that had been restless for 26 years. This was what it meant to be a father. Not just the biology, but the choice to stand between your child and the darkness of the world. "When do we start?" Diana asked. "Anthony's next meeting is Thursday. That gives us 5 days to prepare." Richard pulled out his phone to call Jake. "But first, I think we should pay Samuel Blackthorne a visit. It's time he learned the truth about his father." Diana was quiet for so long that Richard thought she might refuse. Finally, she nodded. "Okay, but if this goes wrong, if Samuel chooses Anthony over justice, then we do this without him. But Diana, I have a feeling about this young man. I think when he learns what his father did to your mother, he's going to be just as determined as we are to make things right." Outside the window, storm clouds were gathering over Charleston again, casting long shadows across the historic district. But for the first time since he'd seen Diana wearing those emerald earrings, Richard felt something that might have been hope. Justice was coming for Anthony Blackthorne, and this time, he wouldn't escape by silencing his victims. Samuel Blackthorne's law office occupied the top floor of a restored antebellum mansion on Broad Street. All polished hardwood and floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a commanding view of Charleston's historic district. Richard studied the building from across the street, noting the security cameras and the steady stream of well-dressed clients entering and leaving. "He's successful," Diana observed, her voice tight with nervous energy. She'd changed clothes 3 times before settling on a simple blue dress that brought out her eyes, and, Richard couldn't help but notice, made her look heartbreakingly like Marissa. "Success doesn't mean corruption," Richard replied, though he understood her anxiety. They were about to tell the man she was falling in love with that his father was a murderer. There was no script for that conversation. What if Jake's wrong? What if Samuel's been lying about who he is? Then we'll know soon enough. Richard checked his phone. Jake was positioned in a coffee shop across the street, watching for any sign that their meeting had been compromised. But my gut tells me we're doing the right thing. The law office's reception area was elegant, but understated, decorated with legal volumes and local art. The receptionist, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes, looked up as they entered. "I'm Colonel Richard Haverhill," he said. "I believe Mr. Blackthorne is expecting me." "Yes, of course, and Miss Whitlock," Diana said quietly. "Diana Whitlock." The receptionist's expression brightened with recognition. "Oh, you're the young lady from the hotel, Mr. Blackthorne talks about you all the time." She paused, studying Diana's face. "Are you feeling all right, dear? You look pale." "I'm fine, just nervous. Nothing to be nervous about with Samuel. He's one of the good ones." The receptionist pressed a button on her phone. "Mr. Blackthorne, your 2:00 is here." Samuel emerged from his office moments later, and Richard felt his chest tighten as he got his first close look at Anthony Blackthorne's son. The young man was tall and lean, with dark hair and intelligent brown eyes that immediately found Diana. The smile that crossed his face was genuine, unguarded, and completely smitten. "Diana, this is a wonderful surprise. I wasn't expecting to see you today." Samuel's gaze shifted to Richard, taking in his military bearing and serious expression. "Colonel Haverhill, I presume. Diana mentioned you were staying at the hotel." "Mr. Blackthorne, thank you for agreeing to meet with us on short notice." "Of course, please, come in." Samuel gestured toward his office, but Richard caught the subtle wariness that had crept into his expression, a good lawyer's instincts. Reading the tension in the room, Samuel's private office was a study in controlled elegance. Antique desk, leather-bound legal volumes, framed diplomas from Harvard Law School. But it was the photographs on his credenza that caught Richard's attention. Samuel at various charity events, Samuel volunteering at a legal aid clinic, Samuel with what appeared to be pro bono clients, no family photos, no pictures with Anthony Blackthorne. "Can I get you anything? Coffee? Water?" "This isn't a social call," Richard said. Settling into one of the client chairs, Diana took the seat beside him, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "We need to discuss your father." Samuel's entire demeanor changed. His shoulders tensed, his expression grew shuttered, and he moved behind his desk as if it could provide protection from whatever was coming. "I don't discuss my father's business with anyone, Colonel, as I'm sure you understand, even when that business involves murder." The word hung in the air like smoke from a gun. Samuel went very still, his knuckles white where they gripped the edge of his desk. "That's a serious accusation," he said carefully. "It's a serious crime." Richard leaned forward. "Samuel, what do you know about a woman named Marissa Coldwell?" Samuel's eyes flicked to Diana, confusion and something that might have been fear warring in his expression. "I've never heard that name. She disappeared from Charleston 26 years ago, the night before she was supposed to marry me." Samuel was quiet for a long moment, studying Richard's face. "You're talking about a missing person case from 1998. I'm talking about a kidnapping and murder that your father committed because he was obsessed with a woman who wouldn't return his feelings. My father is a businessman. He's never been charged with because he's very good at covering his tracks and eliminating witnesses." Richard's voice hardened. "But not good enough. We have evidence, Samuel, letters written by the victim, testimony from people who worked for your father, documentation of the cover-up." Samuel looked genuinely shaken, but Richard couldn't tell if it was shock at the accusations or shock at being caught. "Why are you telling me this?" Samuel asked. Diana spoke for the first time since they'd entered the office. "Because I'm Marissa Coldwell's daughter." The silence that followed was deafening. Samuel stared at Diana as if she'd just claimed to be descended from royalty, his face cycling through disbelief, recognition, and something that looked like horror. "That's impossible," he whispered. "Is it?" Diana's voice was steady, but Richard could see her hands trembling. "Look at me, Samuel. Really look at me. I'm 26 years old. I have no memory of my life before age 5. I was raised by an aunt who's been terrified of something my entire life. And I'm wearing earrings that Richard gave to my mother the night he proposed." Samuel's gaze dropped to the emerald earrings, and Richard saw the exact moment when understanding hit him. The young man's face went white as parchment. "Oh, God," Samuel breathed. "Oh my God, Diana. Your father kidnapped my mother from a hotel parking lot. He kept her prisoner for 9 months. When she arranged for me to be taken to safety, he murdered her." Diana's voice was gaining strength, powered by 26 years of buried truth. She died protecting me from the man whose son I've been falling in love with." Samuel stood abruptly, walking to the window with his back to them. Richard could see his shoulders shaking. "I knew something was wrong," Samuel said quietly. Growing up, there were always things that didn't make sense. Business meetings at odd hours, phone calls he'd taken private, people who'd look at me with pity, I guess, like they knew something I didn't. "What kind of things?" Richard asked. "Money that didn't match his declared income, properties he owned through shell companies, people who worked for him who'd disappear suddenly." Samuel turned back to face them, and his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "When I was 16, I found a gun in his study. Not a hunting rifle or something for protection, a professional weapon. When I asked about it, he said it was for business. Did you believe him? I wanted to. God help me. I wanted to believe that my father was just a successful businessman who happened to operate in gray areas. But deep down," Samuel's voice broke, "deep down, I think I always knew he was capable of terrible things." Diana rose from her chair and moved toward him, her expression softening despite everything. "This isn't your fault, Samuel. Isn't it? I took his money for law school. I've been taking his money my entire adult life, pretending I didn't know where it came from." Samuel looked at her with anguish. "How can you even stand to be in the same room with me?" "Because you're not him," Diana said simply. "Jake investigated you, Samuel. You're nothing like your father. You do pro bono work. You volunteer at legal aid clinics. You've never taken a penny from his illegal activities for your practice. How do you know that?" Richard pulled out a file folder. "Because we've been watching you, trying to figure out if you could be trusted. Everything we found confirms that you're exactly what you appear to be. An honest man who's been kept in the dark about his father's crimes." Samuel sank into his desk chair, looking older than his 32 years. "What do you want from me?" "We want you to help us bring him to justice," Richard said. "Diana's going to gather evidence of his illegal activities at the hotel, but we need inside information. His schedule, his security arrangements, his vulnerabilities. You want me to betray my own father. We want you to help us stop a man who's murdered innocent people and is continuing to do so," Diana corrected. "Samuel, Anthony is slowly poisoning my aunt, the only family I've ever known, because she has information about my mother's death. This isn't about betrayal. It's about justice." Samuel was quiet for so long that Richard wondered if they'd lost him. Finally, he looked up at Diana with an expression of heartbreaking resolve. "What do you need?" Richard felt something tighten his chest loosen. "Everything you can tell us about his Thursday meetings at the hotel, security, personnel, timing, anything that might help us gather evidence. And after we have that evidence, we turn it over to the authorities and make sure Anthony Blackthorne spends the rest of his life in prison." Samuel nodded slowly. "There's something you should know. My father's been agitated lately, more paranoid than usual. He keeps talking about loose ends, about people who know too much. I think he suspects that someone's investigating the past." Diana and Richard exchanged glances. Their window of opportunity was closing faster than they'd hoped. "Then we move quickly," Richard said. "Samuel, are you in this all the way?" Samuel looked at Diana, and Richard saw love and determination warring with a lifetime of complicated family loyalty. Finally, the young man nodded. "I'm in, whatever it takes to stop him." The installation of the surveillance equipment went flawlessly. Diana moved through the Ashford's third-floor conference room with practiced efficiency on Wednesday morning, her cleaning supplies concealing the tiny cameras and recording devices. To any observer, she was simply doing her job, polishing the mahogany table, straightening the chairs, dusting the elaborate crown molding. But Richard, watching the security feeds from Jake's laptop in a van parked across the street, could see the subtle tremor in her hands as she positioned the final camera inside a fake electrical outlet. "Easy," he murmured into his earpiece. "You're doing great." Diana's voice came back steady, but tense. "Camera 4 is active. Voice recorder is under the credenza. I'm finishing up now. Any sign of unusual security?" "No, everything looks normal. But," Diana paused in her dusting, "there's something different about the room setup today. Usually they have it configured for 8 people. Today there are only 4 chairs arranged around the table." Richard exchanged a look with Jake. "Smaller meeting. More intimate. Could be good or bad for us." "Could be both," Jake muttered, adjusting the receiver frequencies. All equipment is green across the board, Diana. You need to clear out. Building security just logged someone entering through the main entrance, through the van's tinted windows. Richard watched Diana emerge from the hotel service entrance 3 minutes later. She walked to the coffee shop where Samuel was waiting, playing the part of a woman meeting her boyfriend for lunch. But Richard could see the tension in her shoulders. The way she kept glancing back at the hotel, his phone buzzed with a text from Samuel. Father confirmed for 2 p.m. meeting, unusual security detail. He's bringing 4 guards instead of the usual 2. Something has him spooked. Richard showed the message to Jake, who swore softly, "This feels like a setup." For who? That's what worries me. At 1:45 p.m., the first black sedan arrived. Richard watched through binoculars as 2 men in expensive suits emerged. Definitely security, definitely armed. They swept the hotel entrance with professional efficiency before taking positions. "Heads up," Jake said, monitoring police frequencies. "I'm picking up chatter about increased patrol presence in this area. Nothing specific, but someone requested additional units. Anthony's doing. Or someone who knows what we're planning." Jake's expression was grim. "Rick, we should abort. This doesn't feel right." Richard looked toward the coffee shop where Diana and Samuel sat at a window table, playing their parts perfectly. His daughter had volunteered to risk everything to bring her mother's killer to justice. He wasn't going to let her down. "We stick to the plan." At 1:58 p.m., Anthony Blackthorne arrived. Richard had seen photos, had studied surveillance footage, but seeing the man in person was different. Anthony was shorter than expected, compact and well-dressed. With silver hair and cold blue eyes that missed nothing, he moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to power, surrounded by his security detail like a minor dictator. "That's him," Richard said into his earpiece. "Diana, Samuel, he's here," through the surveillance feeds. They watched Anthony and 3 other men settle into the conference room. The image quality was excellent, the audio crystal clear. Whatever business Anthony Blackthorne was conducting, they were going to have every word of it for the first 20 minutes. It was standard criminal enterprise, money laundering operations, drug distribution networks, territorial disputes with competing organizations. Exactly the kind of evidence that would put Anthony away for life, but nothing they didn't already suspect. Then one of Anthony's associates mentioned a name that made Richard's blood freeze. "What about the Whitlock situation? You said you wanted that handled before the end of the week." Anthony's voice was casual, conversational. "Corinne will be dead within 48 hours. The medication switch Elaine arranged is working perfectly. Natural causes, untraceable. And the girl. Diana Whitlock is more of a problem. Someone's been asking questions about her. And I don't like coincidences. A young woman with no documented history before age 5. Raised by Marissa's sister. Working in the same hotel where I conduct business." Anthony's laugh was cold. "Either it's an incredible stroke of bad luck, or someone's playing games with me." Richard felt the world tilt. Anthony knew. Somehow, he knew exactly who Diana was. "She could be useful," one of the other men suggested. "Pretty girl like that, if she cooperates." "She won't cooperate. She's got too much of her mother in her." Anthony's voice turned ugly. "I spent 9 months trying to break Marissa Coldwell, and she never gave me what I wanted. Her daughter will be the same way. So what's the plan? Tonight, make it look like an accident. Hotel fire, gas leak, something that eliminates her without raising questions, and make sure there's nothing left to identify." Richard was already moving, grabbing equipment and heading for the van's exit. "Jake, call the police. Anonymous tip about criminal activity at the hotel, now." "Rick, wait. He's going to kill her tonight. I won't let that happen." Richard was halfway across the street when Jake's voice crackled through his earpiece. "Rick, stop. Look at the hotel entrance." Richard froze on the sidewalk. Elaine Blackthorne was walking into the Ashford Colonial Inn, moving with the jerky, unnatural gait of someone on the edge of a complete breakdown. Even from a distance, he could see that she was talking to herself, her face streaked with tears. "Who is that?" Jake asked. "Anthony's wife, the woman who's been poisoning Corinne." Richard ducked behind a parked car as Elaine disappeared into the hotel. "She looks like she's having some kind of mental collapse." The The surveillance feeds showed Elaine entering the conference room without knocking. Anthony looked up in surprise and annoyance. "What the hell are you doing here, Elaine?" "I can't do this anymore," she said, her voice breaking. "I can't keep killing people for you." The room went silent. Anthony's associates shifted nervously, and Richard could see Anthony calculating, weighing options. "Gentlemen, if you'll excuse us, my wife is having one of her episodes." "No," Elaine's voice was shrill. "They need to hear this. They need to know what kind of monster they're working for." "Elaine, shut your mouth and get out of here before you say something you'll regret." "Regret?" Elaine laughed, a broken sound that made Richard's skin crawl. "You want to know about regret? I regret not stopping you 26 years ago when you brought that poor girl to the house. I regret not calling the police when I heard her crying at night. I regret helping you cover up her murder." Anthony was on his feet now, his face flushed with rage. "You've lost your mind." "Yes, I have. And do you know what finally broke me? Finding out that the girl you want to kill tonight is the daughter of the woman you murdered. The baby that got away. The one piece of evidence that could have brought you down all these years." Elaine pulled something from her purse. Richard couldn't see what it was on the surveillance feed. "Our daughter would have been the same age as Diana Whitlock if you hadn't killed her too." The confession hit the room like a physical blow. Even Anthony's hardened associates looked shocked. "Our daughter died of SIDS," Anthony said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Our daughter died because you shook her when she wouldn't stop crying. Just like you killed Marissa Coldwell when she wouldn't love you back. Just like you're planning to kill Diana tonight." Elaine's voice was getting stronger, more focused. "But I won't let you. Not this time. Elaine, give me whatever you're holding, and let's discuss this privately. It's your gun, Anthony. The same one you used to kill Marissa." Elaine's hand was steady now, pointing the weapon directly at her husband. "The same one that's going to end this nightmare." Richard was already running toward the hotel entrance. Jake close behind him, through his earpiece. He could hear chaos erupting in the conference room. Shouting, the sound of chairs overturning, Anthony's voice raised in panic. "Diana, Samuel, get out of the coffee shop now. This is about to go very bad." But as Richard reached the hotel lobby, he could see Diana and Samuel running toward the building, not away from it. They'd heard the commotion and were coming to help. "No!" Richard shouted, but it was too late. The elevator doors closed on Diana's determined face just as the first gunshot echoed from the third floor. Richard took the stairs 3 at a time, his heart hammering against his ribs. He'd found his daughter after 26 years, learned the truth about Marissa's death, and gained an ally in Samuel. He wasn't going to lose any of them to Anthony Blackthorne's final. Desperate gambit. Behind him, Jake was coordinating with emergency responders. But Richard knew help wouldn't arrive in time. Whatever was happening in that conference room, whatever Elaine Blackthorne had finally decided to do about a lifetime of complicity in murder, it was going to end before the cavalry arrived. Richard reached the 3rd floor just as the second gunshot shattered the afternoon quiet, and the sound of screaming began. Richard reached the 3rd floor to find the hallway in chaos. Hotel guests were streaming out of their rooms. Drawn by the gunshots and screaming, through the confusion, he spotted Diana and Samuel pressed against the wall near the conference room door, their faces pale with terror. "Stay back," Richard commanded, pushing through the crowd. "Everyone get downstairs now." The conference room door hung open, revealing a scene from hell. One of Anthony's associates lay motionless near the window, blood pooling beneath his head. Another was crouched behind an overturned table, clutching a wounded arm. And in the center of it all, Anthony and Elaine faced each other like gladiators in a deadly arena. Elaine held the gun with both hands now, her finger on the trigger, tears streaming down her face. Anthony stood 10 feet away, his expensive suit torn, a cut bleeding above his left eye. 26 years, Elaine said, her voice eerily calm. 26 years I've watched you destroy everything good in this world. Marissa Coldwell, our own daughter, that old woman in Arkansas. When does it end, Anthony? Put the gun down, Elaine. You're not a killer, aren't I? I killed Corinne Whitlock as surely as if I'd put a bullet in her head. I poisoned an innocent woman because you told me to. Elaine's grip tightened on the weapon. But I won't let you hurt Diana. That girl has suffered enough for our sins. Anthony's eyes flicked toward the doorway, and Richard realized the man had spotted them. Anthony's face twisted into something that might have been a smile. "You're right, Elaine. That girl has suffered enough, but not as much as she's about to." In one fluid motion, Anthony lunged past his wife toward the door. Elaine screamed and spun to follow him with the gun, but she was too slow. Anthony burst into the hallway, grabbed Diana by the throat, and pressed a knife to her neck before anyone could react. "Everyone back up!" Anthony shouted, his voice echoing off the walls. "I walk out of here with the girl, or she dies right now." Richard found himself staring down the barrel of his own worst nightmare. His daughter, the daughter he'd just found, was being held hostage by the man who'd murdered her mother. History repeating itself with surgical precision. "Let her go, Anthony," Richard said, keeping his voice steady. "Your fight is with me. My fight is with anyone who threatens my business." "Colonel Haverhill?" "Yes, I know who you are. I've known since the day you checked into this hotel." Anthony's grip tightened on Diana, and Richard could see her struggling to breathe. "Did you really think you could investigate me without consequences?" "I thought you were dead," Diana gasped. "I thought you died years ago." Anthony laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Dead. I've been thriving while you grew up hiding in those mountains. But I always knew you'd surface eventually. Marissa's daughter, carrying her blood, wearing her jewelry, his eyes fixed on the emerald earrings. I should have killed you when you were a baby, but you didn't," Samuel said, stepping forward despite the knife at Diana's throat. "You've spent 26 years running from the truth, and now it's caught up with you." Anthony's gaze shifted to his son, and Richard saw something flicker in the older man's eyes. Surprise, pain, maybe even regret. "Samuel, my boy, you shouldn't be here." "Yes, I should. Someone needs to speak for all the people you've hurt." Samuel's voice was steady, but Richard could see his hands shaking. "Diana told me what you did to her mother, how you kept her prisoner, how you murdered her when she tried to protect her child. That woman was nothing to you. She was everything to me." Samuel's composure finally cracked. "She was the mother of the woman I love, and you killed her. You killed her because she wouldn't submit to your sick obsession." Anthony's face went through a series of expressions. Confusion, rage, and finally something that looked like understanding. "You love her, more than my own life. Then you're a fool, just like she was." Anthony pressed the knife deeper into Diana's neck, drawing a thin line of blood. "Love makes you weak, son. It makes you vulnerable." "No," Richard said, taking another step forward. "Love makes you strong. It made Marissa strong enough to die protecting Diana. It made Corinne strong enough to raise a child who wasn't hers. And it's going to make me strong enough to end you." But before Richard could move, Elaine appeared in the doorway behind them, the gun still clutched in her trembling hands. "Anthony, please," she whispered. "She's just a child. She never hurt anyone. She's evidence, Elaine. Living, breathing evidence of what I did 26 years ago." Anthony's eyes were wild now, the mask of civilization completely stripped away. "If she talks, if she testifies, everything we've built will come crashing down." "Everything we've built is already gone," Elaine said. "The moment you brought Marissa Coldwell to our house, the moment you put your hands on our own daughter, it was all over." The confession hung in the air like smoke. Even Anthony's surviving associate, still cowering behind the overturned table, looked shocked. "Our daughter died of SIDS," Anthony said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Our daughter died because you shook her when she cried too much during one of your business meetings, just like you killed Marissa when she wouldn't stop fighting you." Elaine stepped fully into the hallway, her face streaked with tears, but her aim steady. "I've lived with that guilt for 26 years, Anthony. I won't live with Diana's death, too." Time seemed to slow. Richard could see Anthony calculating, weighing his options. The knife was still at Diana's throat, but Elaine had a clear shot at her husband's head. Samuel was positioning himself to help Diana if she could break free, and somewhere in the distance, sirens were finally approaching. "You won't shoot me, Elaine," Anthony said with false confidence. "You need me. You've always needed me. I needed the man I married 30 years ago, but that man died the night you brought Marissa home." Elaine's finger tightened on the trigger. "You want to know what finally broke me? It wasn't the murders or the drugs or the money laundering. It was watching Diana clean that conference room, seeing her smile at Samuel, realizing that she had the same gentle spirit her mother had, and knowing that you were going to destroy her the same way you destroyed everything else good in this world. Elaine, I'm sorry. Diana, Elaine said, looking directly at the young woman trapped in her husband's arms. I'm sorry for what my husband did to your mother. I'm sorry for poisoning your aunt. I'm sorry for being too weak to stop any of it until now. Mrs. Blackthorne. You don't have to, Diana started to say, but her words were cut off by Anthony's sudden movement. He spun toward his wife, dragging Diana with him, the knife still pressed to her throat. You want to play hero, Elaine? Fine, but when I kill this girl, her blood is on your hands too. That's when Diana made her move. Instead of trying to pull away from the knife, she drove her elbow back into Anthony's ribs with all the strength she could muster. He gasped and loosened his grip just enough for her to twist away from the blade. Samuel lunged forward, grabbing Diana and pulling her toward safety. Anthony, off balance and enraged, raised the knife to strike at his own son, and Elaine, faced with the choice between her husband and an innocent young woman, finally chose justice over loyalty. The gun roared 3 times in rapid succession. Anthony spun and fell, blood spreading across the hotel's expensive carpet. His eyes, still holding that cold intelligence, found Diana's face one last time. You look just like her, he whispered. Just like Marissa. Then Anthony Blackthorne closed his eyes forever, taking 26 years of secrets and violence with him to whatever judgment awaited murderers and monsters. Elaine dropped the gun and sank to her knees. Sobbing, Samuel held Diana against his chest, both of them shaking with reaction and relief, and Richard stood in the hallway of a Charleston hotel, watching his daughter come to terms with the fact that she was finally, truly safe. But as the sirens grew louder and police footsteps echoed in the stairwell, Richard felt a sharp pain in his side. Looking down, he saw blood seeping through his shirt. In all the chaos, he hadn't realized that Anthony's knife had found him during those final seconds of struggle. Richard, Diana broke away from Samuel, rushing to his side as he sank to his knees. It's okay, he managed, though the world was starting to spin. It's over now. You're safe. As consciousness faded, Richard heard Diana calling his name and felt her hands pressing against his wound. He'd found his daughter, brought her mother's killer to justice, and given her a chance at happiness with a good man. It was, he thought as darkness claimed him, enough. 6 months later, the morning mist clung to the headstones at Magnolia Cemetery like whispered prayers. Soft and silver in the early Charleston light, Diana stood between 2 graves that had been placed side by side at her request. One marked Colonel Richard Haverhill, beloved father, and the other, Marissa Coldwell, beloved mother and daughter. She wore a simple black dress and the emerald earrings that had started everything, their green fire catching the first rays of sunshine breaking through the Spanish moss. In her hands, she held a bouquet of white roses and a letter she'd written, but would never send. I brought you together, she said softly to the headstones. I know you only had a few hours together in the hospital before Dad died, but the nurses said he smiled when I told him about you, Mama, about how you fought to save me, about how much you loved him. The letter in her hands was one of many she'd found in Richard's hotel room after the shooting. Pages and pages that Marissa had written during her captivity, declarations of love that had survived 26 years, and a monster's attempt to bury the truth. Diana had memorized every word, but there was one passage that she returned to whenever the weight of everything that had happened threatened to overwhelm her. I dream about our wedding day, Richard. I dream that I'm walking down the aisle in my grandmother's dress, and you're waiting for me at the altar with that smile that makes me believe in forever. I dream that we have children who grow up safe and loved, who never have to know about the darkness that exists in this world. I dream that love really is stronger than everything else, even when everything else seems so much bigger and scarier than we are. She was right, you know, Diana said, placing the white roses on Marissa's grave. Love really is stronger. It brought me to Charleston. It helped me find Dad. It gave me Samuel. She paused, touching the simple diamond ring on her left finger. Not the ring Richard had been carrying for 26 years, but one that Samuel had chosen himself. And it gave me both of you, even if I only got to keep Dad for a little while. The sound of footsteps on the gravel path made her turn. Samuel approached carrying his own bouquet, yellow roses for Marissa and red ones for Richard. He'd aged in the past 6 months, The boyish enthusiasm replaced by something deeper and more thoughtful. Watching your father die and learning that he was a monster did that to a person? "You're early," he said, settling beside her on the stone bench that faced the graves. "Couldn't sleep. Too many dreams." Diana leaned into his warmth, grateful as always for his solid presence. Good dreams mostly, about Mama and Dad, about the life they should have had. Samuel placed his flowers beside Diana's, then sat quietly for a moment. He'd been doing that a lot lately, taking time to process, to think before he spoke. Diana loved that about him, the way he considered his words like a man who'd learned the weight they could carry. "Elaine died yesterday," he said finally. Diana felt her breath catch. "In the hospital. In her sleep, the doctors said her body just gave up. She'd been carrying guilt for so long that when she finally let it go, there wasn't enough left of her to keep fighting." Samuel's voice was steady, but Diana could see the pain in his eyes. "She left something for you." He pulled a small, wrapped package from his jacket pocket. Diana stared at it, remembering the broken woman who'd saved her life by killing her own husband. "She wrote you a letter," Samuel continued, "and she wanted you to have this." Inside the package was a locket, old, tarnished silver with intricate engraving. Diana opened it to find 2 photographs, a young woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile, and a baby girl with dark hair and Diana's unmistakable features. "That's Elaine's daughter," Samuel explained. "Sarah, she would have been your age if she'd lived." Elaine said looking at you was like seeing what Sarah might have become. If... He couldn't finish the sentence. Diana studied the photographs through tears. Another victim of Anthony Blackthorne's violence. Another life cut short by his inability to control his rage. But also, in some strange way, a sister she'd never known she'd had. The letter. Samuel handed her a cream-colored envelope with her name written in shaky handwriting. Diana opened it carefully, aware that these might be among the last words Elaine Blackthorne had ever written. "My dear Diana, I know I have no right to call you dear. No right to anything after what I allowed to happen to your mother and your aunt. But I need you to know that in the end, saving your life was the first good thing I'd done in 26 years. I was pregnant when Anthony brought your mother to our house. I was carrying Sarah, and I was so afraid of what Anthony might do if I crossed him that I let him keep Marissa prisoner in our home. I told myself I was protecting my own child, but really I was just protecting myself. Sarah died 3 months after your mother escaped with you. Anthony never admitted what he'd done, but I knew. A mother knows. And instead of calling the police, instead of making him pay for what he'd done to our daughter and to Marissa, I helped him cover it up. I've been helping him cover up murders ever since. But when I saw you cleaning that hotel room, when I realized you were Marissa's daughter and that Anthony was planning to kill you too, I couldn't be a coward anymore. Sarah deserved better from her mother. Marissa deserved better. You deserved better. The locket belonged to my mother. Inside are the only pictures I have of Sarah. I want you to have them because, in some strange way, you're the daughter I should have protected and couldn't. You're the daughter I should have raised to be brave and kind and strong. Take care of Samuel. He's a good man despite having a monster for a father. He loves you the way his father should have loved me. Gently, honestly, without trying to own or control you. That kind of love is rare and precious. I hope someday you can forgive me. I hope Sarah can forgive me. I hope your mother, wherever she is, can forgive me too. With love and sorrow, Elaine Blackthorne. Diana folded the letter carefully and slipped it into her purse along with the locket. Another piece of the puzzle, another layer of tragedy and loss that had somehow, impossibly, led to this moment of peace. "Are you okay?" Samuel asked. "I think so, it's just, there's so much sadness in all of this. So many people who got hurt." Diana looked at the graves of her parents, then at the man she was going to marry. "But there's beauty too. Mama and Dad found each other, even if it was only for a few hours at the end. You and I found each other. Corinne got to see me safe before she died." "Speaking of Corinne," Samuel said, "I have something else for you." This time he pulled out a legal document. Her will was finally probated. She left you the cabin in Arkansas and something she called the Truth Fund, money she'd been saving for years in case you ever needed to disappear again. Diana took the document, scanning the legal language until she found the amount. It was enough to start over anywhere in the world. enough to build any life she wanted. What will you do with it? Samuel asked. Diana looked around the cemetery, at the Spanish moss and the weathered headstones and the city beyond, where she'd learned who she really was. Charleston had given her answers, but it had also given her Samuel, and a sense of belonging she'd never felt in the mountains. I want to start a foundation, she said, for missing persons, for families who don't know what happened to their loved ones. The Marissa Coldwell Foundation. She met Samuel's eyes. Will you help me? Always, he said, taking her hand. Whatever you want to do, wherever you want to go, I'll be with you. Diana stood and placed her hand on Richard's headstone, feeling the cool marble under her palm. Thank you, Dad, for finding me, for protecting me, for showing me what it means to never give up hope. Then she touched Marissa's headstone, closing her eyes and imagining the mother she'd never known. Thank you, Mama, for saving me, for loving me enough to die for me, for believing that love really is stronger than everything else. Samuel rose and took her hand, and together they walked toward the cemetery gates, where their future was waiting. Behind them, the morning sun climbed higher, burning away the mist and illuminating 2 headstones that marked not just the end of 2 lives, but the beginning of something new. The emerald earrings caught the light one last time as Diana and Samuel disappeared into the Charleston morning, carrying with them the love of the dead and the promise of all the tomorrows they'd been given, purchased with blood and sacrifice. But theirs now to shape however they chose. Love had indeed proven stronger than everything else. Even death, even 26 years, even monsters and the darkness they left behind.